Okay, so counting the days, slowing us down. Sfirat HaOmer is the counting of the Omer, and it's the Jewish practice of counting the days from the Exodus until God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. And these events are marked on the Jewish calendar by Pesach and Shavuot. So the idea is we were so excited to leave Egypt and receive the Torah that we counted each day from when we left Egypt until it was in our own possession, from day 1 to day 49. So for those of you who don't know, today is the 27th day of the Omer, and since you count at nightfall, in Omaha, that means pretty much after we close this session, you can count the 28th day. Although I know many of us have been counting some other days. Today for me is day 53. As many joked, this year there were approximately 3,247 days in the month of March. And the funny thing is 5780 doesn't even have an Adar 2. So wow, that was crazy how long that month was. So we've already been social distancing for longer than we can count the Omer, but we are still in a place where there is really a beautiful opportunity to learn from these counting of the days, and I'm super excited to see how each of the rabbis are going to approach this topic. So, you know, given our current situation, I'm curious, like my opening question for you all, I will share in a second. I also want to share with everyone on the call, if you know how to use the chat function, that's going to be really the easiest way for you to share a question with the rabbis. And after my intro question, we'd love to just dive right in to audience questions. So as they're answering this first question, think about what you want to ask, and feel free to type it in the chat whenever you have a moment. And yeah, we'll begin. So I'm curious for each of you to share, what is your connection? What have you found in these 20 odd days of counting the Omer that have overlapped with our life with COVID-19? How have you found strength through the practice of the Omer? Anyone want to go first?
I elect Rabbi Katzman as the Kohen.
You always make him go first.
I also elect him to unmute himself.
All right. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this wonderful Farbrengen, what we call it, gathering of minds. And okay, so what are we doing? How are we counting the Omer, and what are we counting anyway? So obviously all these years, I see there's some of us already with gray hair that have been counting the Omer for many years. And some of us might have even been so busy that we didn't know about the counting of the Omer. But even when we count the Omer, what exactly are we counting? So there are obviously many contradictory or even opposing opinions about, for example, the climbing out of Egypt. Okay, we were sunk, we were very deep into the Egyptian enslavement, which obviously represented many levels of impurity. To be exact, it was 49 levels of impurity that the Jewish people sunk to. Had they gone one more level down, God forbid, they would have never been, it would have been beyond return. Therefore, the exodus had to be in haste, and immediately as soon as the time came, they had to leave, because had they not left immediately, then they would have been stuck there forever. So 49, so they were at 49 negative points when they're leaving Egypt. And then we're told that when they received the Torah, when we received the Torah, we had to reach 49 levels above, getting closer, reaching the highest level that can possibly be reached. And then God gives us the 50th as a bonus, and we receive the Torah. So from the days that we used to study math, we know that negative 49 to positive 49 would be 98. Is that right? Yeah. So how do we get away with counting only 49? If each day only represents one step, one movement, so from going to negative, reaching 0, and then from 0 climbing up to 49 would really take a lot longer than 49. So one of the commentators actually explained, I think is the Meshech, I don't want to say because I might make a mistake. Anyway, but the insight, which I find very interesting, especially in our situation now, is that while we were counting, while we were undoing, or rather instead of undoing the negative 49 times, and then starting to build 49 positive, they figured out, or we figured out, how to take the negative and turn it into a positive. So that can all be done in one day. So in essence, there is no such thing as a negative trait or a bad trait. There's a trait that could be used in a negative way and it could be used in a positive way. So obviously when we're in the house with our spouse for 53 days, there's a good possibility that we might get indignant, we might get angry, we might lose our cool sometimes. So that's obviously a negative trait, that gevura, that being strict and being very, very, very concerned about the other person's behavior is obviously a negative trait. But if that very, very trait is used to defend the child that's been offended by or been attacked by the bully in school, then that indignant behavior becomes a positive. And if you just want to be a nice guy and say, no big deal, just let it go, that expression of chesed, that expression of kindness is obviously a misplaced and inappropriate expression of kindness, and it's actually evil. So when we identify the 7 traits into 7 within each other, which equals 49, which is the whole focus of the Sphira to Omer, the counting of the Omer. And Sphira also has the term of refining or polishing or beautifying. That's exactly what we're doing. We're taking the garbage and we're recycling it and turning it into beautiful, usable, and stuff that we can brag about and we can be proud with. So when we find ourselves in our current situation, especially where there's, it's definitely an evil streak, what's called virus, according to the Polish pronunciation, it's actually means sin, because a virus from transgressions. But we likewise, when we sit and we analyze, and myself,
I got that joke.
I'm sure the other rabbis here also get many calls from people who are lost, who are despondent, who can't put one foot in front of the other, and just with a little bit of tweaking, we can help them go from feeling lost to feeling empowered, and utilizing these moments that we have to be with our family, with our closest and dearest, and growing through it in a way that we never could before. And I think every day has to be counted, not just as from the oivei, when are we going to be able to get back to normal life, but see how we can really live to the fullest in the present situation. And God should only protect us all, that we should look back at this as a pleasant and a growing block and a nice experience.
Thank you. Thanks, Rabbi Katzman, for that insightful teaching. I was thinking about when we scheduled this panel discussion a long time ago. We gave it the subtitle of how to slow things down, something to that effect, how to slow time down, or how to slow things down and make every day count. Well, it's kind of ironic to me that we chose that title now, because in this in this present circumstance, it feels like time is very much slowed down. We don't need to slow it down anymore. It's I find myself in a, just feeling like time is almost at a standstill, or it's in this weird state where it's just it just kind of, it's its own dimension. It doesn't fit with the rest of the world. Days just bleed into the next. It's hard even to know what day it is or what time it is, because it's all the same. And that's, I think, the danger that we're facing now. Not so much rushing through the days anymore. Now we're in a place of just getting lost in time and forgetting time. And to me, the practice of counting the Omer is very welcome as a spiritual practice at this particular moment, because it conveys a sense of forward motion. And that's maybe one of the most important teachings that I've learned about Sfirat HaOmer as a spiritual practice. I learned it from reading Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, and he talks about the counting of the Omer situates us always on a continuum of time, because wherever you are in the counting, today we're at day 27, that means that we came from somewhere, from day 26 and 25 and 24. We've been moving forward to reach day 27, and we're still, in a place where there's more to go. We're going all the way to 49 toward Sinai. Time does move forward, even though it doesn't feel like it right now. Time is forward moving. Our lives are forward moving. It's by design. I believe that God created the world and created us to live with a purpose, and to be in motion always toward the realization of our purpose. And so I find strength in counting the Omer as a reminder that despite it all, the world, my life, and the dimension of time is not at a standstill. We are moving somewhere, and we're moving in the direction toward Sinai, which is toward God, toward hope and vision and relationship with something greater than ourselves. So I find that in this practice at this particular time.
I guess I'm next. We're doing age order. Rabbi Abraham, I think you're the youngest. This is not something, I've said this before, probably 49 times. So for those who've heard it, I apologize. For me, it's very personal. Look, there's an obvious question when you count the Omer is, why are you counting up? Why not you counting down? You should be counting 49 days until receiving the Torah, 48 days until you receive the Torah, 47 days until you're receiving the Torah. Why are we counting up? And I think there's a message here that is very appropriate for our times. And that is, what I've realized for myself, and I think what I've been sharing with others, is if we would know when this craziness is going to end, was going to end, or will end, we wouldn't be making the most out of the days that we have. In other words, if we knew that in 2 weeks from Monday, there's going to be a vaccine or a treatment that makes us feel all safe to go out and to open up everything, we will be investing for that Monday. For 2 weeks from Monday, we're going to prepare, we're going to buy stock, we're going to sell stock, we're going to buy more real estate, we're going to really prepare and to make sure that when it comes opening day in a week and a half, in 2 weeks, I'm going to make sure that I'm ready for that day. Whereas now, we have no idea when that day is going to be. And as a result, I think that forces us, in a positive way, to live today, not to live for tomorrow, but live today to the fullest. And I think that is the message of the Omer. I think the message of the Omer is, it's not about that I'm counting up towards something. I have to recognize that there's a power, there's a value of today. Now that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. It means, a lot of us, and I see there are a nice amount of people here in this group of 53, very impressive. But I think a lot of us in this group are over the age of 53. And we probably have grandchildren that we haven't seen in a while and we want to see. And I think That's a very difficult thing, and it's very easy for me to say, to even find light in that or to find the silver lining. But I do think there is a silver lining, meaning people are really wanting to hang out with their grandkids or hanging out with whoever, and now it's somewhat limiting and somewhat we're not able to. So either I can just count the days until I'm able to do that. The problem is I have no idea when that day will come, so I can buy one calendar after another and keep marking it off until I just give up. Or I can say, look, I don't know. I don't know when that day is going to come. And instead, let me deepen my relationship with my grandchild. Let me actually try to internalize and understand that maybe I don't have to physically be with them to really to connect them in a much deeper way. And I think easier said than done. I think we're all working on different things now in our time period in whatever we're struggling with, whatever we're working on. But I think that there's a real power in what the Omer is teaching us, and then specifically what the Omer is teaching us this year. I think there's a real power of not planning for tomorrow, but really, really working on today and really making sure that the challenges that are presenting today, I'm able to really be a deep person. I'm able to see the godliness and the meaning in everything that's happening today. And I think, thank God everyone should, and everyone should continue to be healthy in my life. But obviously, unfortunately, there are people who are tragically, have been really, really affected by this. And therefore, it's very difficult for me to talk about any growth point or any positivity when I know so many people who suffer from this. I'm just, and Rabbi Katzman probably can speak probably more than I can about this. And unfortunately, I paid 7 Shiva calls last week, 7. And I didn't get to everybody. I still have probably close to 10 to go. So, and that's an insane amount of people, and that's an insane amount of difficulty and tragedy that we're living in. The reason why I mention that is that I really don't want to come across as saying, oh wow, look at this opportunity for growth in a time like this. I mean, I think there is opportunity for growth. I think we also have to mention that there is so much tragedy today in the world and so much pain in the world. That being said, for us, maybe we should continue to be healthy, and it's not necessarily at our doorstep, or not that we know of, and it might really be at our doorstep. I think there is opportunities for us to reevaluate everything in our lives. I know I've spoken about ad nauseum. I'm sorry for those who've heard this before. It makes us reevaluate the point of a shul. It makes us reevaluate the point of a minyan. It makes us reevaluate the point of davening. It makes us reevaluate the friendships in my life. It makes me reevaluate the relationships in my life. And I mentioned about a grandchild and how everybody is wanting to see their grandchildren. I feel guilty, or not guilty, but I feel bad that my kids haven't seen their grandparents in a long time. And every day, like, I make it my business to make sure that they're Zooming, and I don't feel great about it. I feel like there's something that's lacking. I feel like wanting to tell my parents, and maybe they're watching this, that they should write a letter to their grandkids, something that they haven't done ever, which I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying that there's so much of a reevaluation that's possible for now. And I think it's only because we don't know when this is going to end. And I think that's the idea of the Omer. We're not counting up to say, we're not counting down to say, there's 29 days left to receiving the Torah, because it's not about necessarily just the day that we receive the Torah, but it's about today. And it's about making the most out of, I forgot what today is, Wednesday, right? So it's about making the most of today and making sure that I make every minute count and every minute fruitful. And that's my responsibility in this world. I'm done. Sorry, everybody.
Thank you. I don't know that I'm the youngest. Is that really true?
I'm 32.
I'm 29. No, I'm joking. So it's interesting. This is the first year that I usually don't shave on the Omer. It's a tradition for the first 33 days it's traditional not to shave for the purposes of mourning, actually. And I made a conscious decision that I wanted to shave, and not just because of being on Zoom and people being able to see your face. But I made the conscious decision because it felt like I needed to know that I was waking up every morning and doing something. That in somewhere I've been watching politics online, and you watch the news, and some of these senators or whatever, after they pull off their mask, they've got these kind of beards after a couple of weeks, and it's because why shave, right? What's the point? And so I kind of took it the other way in some ways for me this year. I'm not arguing that I'm right or I'm wrong, but I wanted to make sure that in some ways I had a purpose for waking up every single morning. Like I always knew when I would wake up every single morning, I go to Beth El, I go to morning minyan, I go to work. Like that was an easy thing to be able to do. Now, in some ways, you have to try, and you have to try and make meaning. And so while it sounds kind of ridiculous to say that, shaving, but it was something different for me during this period of the Omer, because again, the first 33 days, it's not uncommon for most people of a certain observant level to not shave. The second thing I'll say is the following of the Omer that has always struck me is that it really is the first time that we start to count. This idea of counting towards Shavuot, of counting towards getting the Torah and receiving the Torah and counting up has always been something that has been meaningful to me, and the mitzvah of doing so and waiting till sundown to be able to do it has always kind of stuck with me. But the idea also is, if you think about what Rabbi Katzman said so beautifully, if you're a slave, then you don't need to know what day it is, right? If you're a slave, it doesn't much matter if it's Monday or Tuesday or Friday or Saturday. It doesn't matter because your schedule is made by someone else. If you're not a slave, if you're free, then you have the ability to set your own calendar, right? You have your ability to make your own decisions. And so the Omer every year between Pesach and Shavuot, that time period has always kind of made me do a little bit of an evaluation to say, okay, you've got this period of time, and usually, not that it's slowing down, but schools are ending, you're getting closer to the summer, right? Things in the synagogue are usually beginning to kind of slow down. It's a great time to be able to reevaluate. And so I think, as all of my brighter colleagues have said, I think this time has been really valuable to be able to kind of take a step back, although I would say more busy than ever, but to take a step back and really appreciate what's important in life. So, yeah.
All right, well, we do have a question from the audience. So Barbara is asking, why do I feel like I'm living through the plagues again? I see a pharaoh and the plagues. Global warming, climate change, hornets, trumpets, COVID. How is counting down going to solve this, or is there an answer? I was hoping that was a serious question and not just, metaphorical. Does anyone want to tackle that?
Sure. Rabbi Katzman? I'm kidding. Okay. Barbara, I think that's a very good point. I was very taken when this whole started. It hit me like a ton of bricks that sometimes we go through parts of davening, parts of our prayers, and we think it's like unrelatable, and even I'm talking about for myself here, I'm the Orthodox rabbi here. A lot of it, we'll talk about plagues, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, but like, I'm never going to see a plague that affects the entire world. Wrong answer. And all of a sudden, something like a magefa, which is accessed a lot of times in our prayers, becomes so relatable. It's affecting all of us. I think, I think that history does repeat itself. I think we are living in some type of, in times when we are incredibly vulnerable. And I think the answer to your question is, just because we're vulnerable doesn't mean that we should lose faith. Just the opposite. Because we are vulnerable, that makes us humble, and that actually makes us feel empowered and loved. And I think, is there any type of protection from any type of plague that we know about? I think, there's a lot of different spiritual ideas that we can talk about. But I think the one thing that make us feel better is that we've experienced this before. The world has experienced this before. And it's a very, very deep message to tell the world. We can just talk about right now, the Jewish people, that there is a force that is leading the world, i.e. the Creator, and that everything that we thought and put so much faith in, all of a sudden has holes in it and is very vulnerable. So my answer to you is, don't feel safe. That's okay. I don't feel safe, and that's okay too. And you know what I do? I daven, and I do everything that I can to protect myself and to protect the world around me. And on the same side, and the flip side, I'm also davening, and I also now deepen my relationship with the Creator. I mentioned this also a lot of times in the past. It says in Psalm 23, David HaMelech, King David says, when I walk in the valley or the shadow of death, I am not fearful because I know you're with me, right? So the question or the point that a rabbi of mine once brought up is that everything in that psalm is in third person. Until I actually get to that verse in that psalm where I am now in a place of difficulty, I'm in a place of plague, I'm in a place of I'm in the shadow, in the valley of death. All of a sudden, we're not talking to God in third person. There's a real direct, intimate relationship and intimate connection. So I think it's okay. Yeah, we're scared. I mean, I think, I don't know you, but I think something that we've spoken a lot about at Beth Israel is knowing the difference between good fear and bad fear, a fear that that can make me grow, and a fear that actually could paralyze me. And I think the second one is terrible. I think the first one is very productive, and I think it's okay for us to feel vulnerable. That doesn't mean that I stop acting, and doesn't mean that I stop yearning.
I think the question I think is a good one, and I certainly feel that also. For me, it raises kind of a complex theological question, because on the one hand, I certainly don't believe that that God brought this as a plague in the sense that the Torah describes, as a punishment or anything. I don't believe that that's the nature of God. At the same time, I do think, I guess, just in my soul, that there's an underlying purpose of some kind, behind all of this, or at the very least, there's something to be learned in it. And I think about the plagues in the Torah, and why did the plagues come one after the other? Well, because Pharaoh, keeps refusing to let the Israelites go, and the Torah says, "in his heart became hardened." And what I've learned in my studies of Pharaoh is that Pharaoh represents intransigence. I mean, it's stubbornness, intransigence, and just ever deepening into a pit of kind of the same pattern of defiance and intransigence and bad choices over and over again. And that's relatable to me as I just think about the world that we live in. I do feel like all of us, collectively as a society, and I think probably lots of us individually too, just have become so mired in certain ways of thinking and acting and choosing, and without even realizing it, our hearts are just kind of hardened to bigger realities that we have lost the capacity to even be aware of. And we keep making the choices over and over again and recommitting to that, and being intransigent in the face of, other kinds of better choices maybe. And this virus comes, if not as a, divine punishment, then perhaps as divine warning or wake-up call, to just say, wait a minute, you're going to be forced now to reevaluate, like Rabbi Ari was saying. You're going to be forced because there's nothing else is doing it for you. You're just caught on this treadmill of, just the heart keeps being hardened to reality. And this is a wake-up call to reevaluate and to relook at the choices that we make. And one thing that I've learned, is just in the course of this change in the ordinary patterns of life, I have gained some insight into, maybe some better insight anyway, into what's really essential in my life. There's so much that I do. If I look back on my kind of ordinary daily schedule before all of this is going on, there's so much stuff that I do that I probably don't even need to do. And there's so many other things that I'm not doing because I'm so busy with the stuff that I don't need to do that the essential things are going untended to. Maybe after we come out of this, it will result in just a realignment. God forbid we should just go back to life as normal, really. I know we all want it, but maybe the purpose of all this is so that we create a new normal in the sense of a better normal.
I'll just jump in for a second here. I think everything is ultimately a point of light. Or, so in the Torah we read where Hashem says, "Umekalelcha or," and those who curse you, I will either curse, but the word or also has the meaning of light. So what God is telling us is that those who curse you, I will bring them to see the light, and therefore they will no longer curse. So every curse, I think, also has the ability to be turned into or, to be turned into light. And since the ultimate light is Torah, and everyone is spending so much time online these days, and there's so much opportunity to study Torah, so I would just make a plug for God's Torah, that you should just cling to it, or our Torah, cling to it and study it, and see the light in the Torah. You'll see, and you'll realize how all those things that seem to be challenging are really points of light, and if we can just turn this around, it's going to be great.
All right, so I'm hoping that there are some good questions out there, because I have really boring questions about agriculture that are related to counting the Omer and Shavuot. So I was hoping to get some good questions. If you don't want to type, that's fine. I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. We'd really love to have some questions as we have in the past. Anyone?
I'll raise a question.
Did you unmute yourself?
Yes. Maybe the problem using the past analogy is that Pharaoh heard, but he didn't listen. And maybe we have heard and we haven't listened.
That's good insight.
Well, it's also a question. I don't know what the rabbis say about that.
Steve, great question. I think. I think what's fascinating what you just said. I mean, I'm listening to myself talk and listening to other people talk, and I noticed about myself that whenever I was impassioned about before this outbreak of this virus, I am more impassioned about now. I'm going to let someone else talk for a second. I'm sorry. If someone could just take me over for a minute.
Does anyone else want to
I
take
got it.
over? Okay.
I'm all over it. I'm all
Rabbi
over it.
Abraham.
I'm all
That
over it.
was
Mine of
roll
figurines
call.
at the moment. So I want to go back a step. I think to Steve's point, I was always interested by the quote of, of God hardening Pharaoh's heart in some ways, right? That always stuck with me. I don't want to make that analogous to the president of the United States or other possible thoughts, but there is something there. I didn't respond to Barbara's question, which I think is a really excellent one. So I'm just going to pivot to that for the moment. What if we are, right? I mean, when I read the article about, hornets or bees or whatever it was in Washington State that were like decapitating other bees. I mean, they were like bees. I literally sat there that morning as I wake up in the morning, I check my iPhone, I come to my little office here, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, I got a virus that's across the globe, and now you're telling me I got hornets in Washington. Like, I mean, come on, like this is The Onion, somebody's making this up. Like, let's kind of move on. I really have the time for this. I don't have the time for, whatever my political stripes, I apologize. I don't have the time for Clorox tablets and Lysol inhalers. Like, I need a level of seriousness, like right now in my life. And so I think that if you, there is, of course, a rabbinic teaching that, you know, if you don't see the leader among you, then you yourself are supposed to step up. And so I do wonder about that, right? Is that as we see things going on around us, you know, I think that we have a responsibility to be able to step up and to say, you know, we want to make things better, right? I'm a huge advocate for and very thankful to the work that the Federation has done. I think each of the synagogues, the Chabad, you know, for you know, helping those in need, you know, to the food pantry at Chabad, to the COVID relief fund that was put together by the Federation, right? Like, we didn't just look at the problem and say, we're not going to do anything, or it's somebody else's problem, or look, the federal government is giving out money for payroll protection, right? Like, people made decisions to act. And I think that that's really very powerful, right? We didn't just kind of rest on our laurels. We made decisions to try and make things better. And so I think that that's a really big step, because I too, I mean, just speaking directly to you, for you, Barbara, I too wondered in my own personal theology, you know, on a number of evenings of davening, you know, is this a test of our humanity and my theology, that we're going through what we're going through? You know, my parents live in Maryland, and the Republican governor of Maryland, right? You know, just, you know, put them in another week of lockdown, right? And so, you know, this is a trying time, and so you're okay. This is a trying time, as we can all tell. And so, that being said, I think that this is gonna bring us out on the other side better, because we're gonna have experienced things that we would not have otherwise experienced. And I think that will make us understand our own humanity better, and it will make us understand others and their humanity better. All right, Ari, it's your shot. I got my kid back off my I got my kid off of my shoulders.
I thank you. Thanks for bailing me out. What I was saying before was, you made a very good point. Hearing and listening to two different things, but it's really, I'm not focusing on big picture. I'm focusing on myself. I know that I have a tendency, probably like the rest of us, that whatever we believed in before this virus, we still believe in today. We just believe in it stronger. So whatever I would be crying about or passionate about before, I would be talking about those same ideas, those same concepts. And if anything, I would use the circumstances of the world to prove my point, or to prove my ideology, or to prove my belief system. And I realize that's a big mistake, because I'm just hearing what I want to hear. So I'm translating messages in the world based on what I always thought was right. Now I have what to hang my hat on. And I think that's, you know, that's okay, but that's not growth. Growth is actually to find something that I was not passionate about and I did not see before. And I think that takes a lot of work to do, but I think that's true growth. The way I see the world has changed as a result, as the world being completely different now, but not based on how I saw it up until now. And I think that takes a lot of work, and that takes true growth, or that takes real character or midos development like we're in right now. And I think, Steve, to your point, yes, we hear what we want to hear. The same politics that we've been talking about up until now, we're now talking about it louder, unless we're not talking politics. Unless we're not talking about that, we're talking about actually something more in my opinion, more meaningful and spiritual, and something about me changing. And me changing is not just what was yesterday is now 5 times because now I really believe in what I believed in yesterday. No, I'm actually reevaluating what I used to believe in, and it's actually changed as me personally. For me, the big challenge is that I'm accomplishing in such a different way than I used to accomplish. And there was a big slide. And for the first week and a half of when life changed, I really slid, and I really lost my faith in all these accomplishments. I lost all my identity, and I started to really reevaluate, as I believe Rabbi Abraham spoke about. I started reevaluating my accomplishments in the first place, and that forced me to change how I look at the world, not to strengthen how I looked at the world up until now. And I think all of us have the ability to do that now. To not just say, however I believed in, whatever I believed in before, I'm now strengthening that belief system. I think just the opposite. I think we have to find something that was a weakness of mine and something that I didn't. And I think that the challenges of today have really tremendous potential. As Rabbi Katzman mentioned, there's so much light in a curse. There's so much potential for change if I'm able to be open to it and understand that I'm not the center of the universe and there's something else that's happening besides me. So I agree with your question, and more importantly, I agree with your statement that it's true, and perhaps that's the lesson. We have to be able to not be just stick to what everything I believed in up until now. I actually have to change, and it's not always about what the government is doing, what the government is not doing. It's not always about what the rabbi is doing, what the rabbi is not doing. And most of the time, it's probably about me and my perspective, how I'm looking at it.
I'd just like to close by saying thank you very much. I was just thinking, connecting to the days of the Omer, as we know, the story of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva who died in a plague during this period, which is why we're not shaving our beards. And the Talmud tells us, why is it that this plague actually occurred? Shelo nahagu kavod ze bazeh. Now, kavod sounds almost like COVID, as you know, but in this context, it means not being respectful and not appreciating the honor of the other fellow. And as is explained, because they were such close friends, they couldn't tolerate that the other friend was thinking differently, had a different bent in how they were interpreting. So they felt like I have to impose my opinion on my colleague, and that really sort of jeopardized them. So if we can go out of this kavod experience and actually coming back, not to where we were, but ahead of where we were, and learn how to respect one another properly and appreciate one another and care about one another the way we've never done before, then I don't want to say that it was worth it, but it'll be okay.
I wanna just insert a few questions, since we've gotten some in the chat and some were to everyone and some are only to me. So I want to make sure I say them out loud, as we only have 15 minutes left to this hour-long session. So 2 questions, and then we'll go around and you can choose one or the other to respond to. One is, would the rabbis talk about how Isaiah's discussion of God's intent to remove spiritual chaff to make us pure, and if or how that might teach us today? So that's one question. And then another question is, let's say this goes on for a little while longer with our social distancing and our changing of the way we do everything. How do we make Jewish education like real Jewish education, not just engaging people or keeping kids involved with fun events? How do we make Jewish education exciting for children in today's day and age? And do we have something that we can learn from shifting to this new normal? So who wants to dive in?
All right, I'll be up. 2 very different questions. I think it's very much related to what Isaiah in that prophecy. I think all the prophecies have a lot of truth to it and are eternal, and that's why they're written down. Nevuah shehutzar chaladoros. It's necessary for all the generations. I think it gets tricky to start saying we know why God is doing something. And I like to stay away from that because I'm not a prophet, but there's definitely a lot of truth to that statement. The question is, how does that translate? What are we supposed to do with that? And I think the question itself is what we're doing about it. Meaning, yeah, that's very true. We have to be able to remove all the luxuries and as Rabbi Stoller mentioned, to focus on what's essential in my life and essential in the world. We have to be able to sift through and to recognize everything. And a lot of that has to do with reevaluating a synagogue, as we mentioned before. And I guess that gets to the second question. I mean, this is not false humility, but I don't really have ideas about making things more innovative and exciting. I don't know if that's the goal. I mean, I think that it was a long question that was asked, and I think there's within the what we'll call the observant world or we'll call the Orthodox world, there's a big challenge for those who know, right? There's a joke going around the internet that what happened like a month ago was very similar to an El Al plane going to Israel, in which like there's a bunch of ultra-Orthodox Jews looking for minions, and 90% of the plane are glued to the televisions. And that was like the joke going around about like all these people are trying to make minions and perhaps slower to socially isolate and socially distance. And I heard a rabbi once spoke, or this rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Weiss said sometimes the voice, the individual voice is what God wants, and not necessarily the voice of the quorum, the voice of the minyan. And therefore right now, obviously what God wants is us to not to make the minyan, and us to daven in our houses and make our houses mini sanctuaries and not try to create ways that might put other people at risk. And don't create a minyan. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that's the message. The message is this is what we need to be doing right now. And I'm not finding such a struggle in engaging the youth, meaning it's true. Just personally, my children are now home. And as a result, I'm probably teaching them more Judaism than they would have gotten outside of the home. So I'm recognizing that the situation has forced us to leave our comfort zone and to become and to reevaluate the educational system in the first place. I think we can't try to fit everything in that we've done in the past to say, well, we have to try to recreate what was done in the past and do it in a way that's socially distant. I think that's a mistake. I think we have to recognize that what we have right now could actually be more valuable than perhaps the system. We just have to maybe educate our children, if we're parents, by ourselves. And that is a big challenge. And that is a huge challenge. And if I think that I'm going to get education from outside my home, I could be wrong, because really Judaism is home-based and is very much from parent to child. And I think that's something that I've learned personally, but I think that's a big message for everybody. I think, yeah, we can recreate all we want, right? And my other job, my other hat that I wear, I'm dealing with children who, are in hospitals and are isolated, and now they're more isolated than always. And we're scrambling to try to entertain them. And I think that's a miss also. Like, yeah, this is the reality. The reality is you're not going to entertain somebody 24/7 on the internet when they could be watching other things that are more entertaining. You can't compete with Hollywood. And you're not going to compete with Hollywood. And I think that whatever, we can create some type of programming online and et cetera, but I think that's not the point. The point is that education is essentially me. I have to live Judaism to give it over to my children. I have to live Judaism in a passionate way, in an innovative way for myself. And then by definition, I'm going to radiate that to my children. So I'm not really addressing the question fully and really giving a full answer to the question. I just think that we can't create second best. We have to reevaluate what we thought was second best really could be best. And I think, again, Judaism is not about paying somebody to learn with my children and to teach my children. Judaism is about my Shabbos table and about my table and about my house. Is my house permeating, or Jewish education, inspiration? Is it permeating creating an environment with guidelines and with direction that says, oh, children, you have such a rich heritage. Embrace it and pass it on. I don't know if I answered the question.
Hopefully you did. And I posted it in the chat to everyone so that if you want to revisit that, the other rabbis, you can see the question as phrased by the original asker. So Rabbi Stoller, do you want to speak? You're on mute.
Yeah, the question is, do you have a transcript of Rabbi Ari's remarks that I could read? I'm kidding. It was, I really liked, Rabbi Ari, what you said. And I agree 100%. One of the things that I've learned through all of this is just how much we in our family anyway outsource to others in respect to our children. Because now we're all here together all day and we're all trying to do our thing. And I mean, we outsource, just before all of this, we outsource, not only the education of our children, but the care of our children, the entertainment of our children, I mean, everything. And I feel it really intensely now because, I'm like everybody else, kind of trying to manage doing my job, but also helping my kids do what they need to do for school and all kinds of things. And my kids end up being on the iPad like 7 hours a day, because my wife and I both work. And that's very difficult for me. And it's heartbreaking for me realizing that if we've created a way of living that we outsource our kids. And if we don't outsource them, we are just completely ill-equipped to be present for them in the way that they deserve. So apropos the kind of stripping away the chaff and purifying us, I think that this time period is challenging us to, really to kind of just completely reorganize, like recalibrate, reorganize, reprioritize our lives and figure out what's essential and what's not, how to go big on the right things and pull away from the wrong things. And we're getting, glimmers of that. I certainly, one of the upsides is that I do get to, have lunch with my kids during the day now and have dinner with them every night, which I don't normally get to do. I, help my son learn to ride his bike, and we play catch a little bit during the day. So these are all bright spots, which are blessings. And at the same time, they kind of highlight just how much I'm ignoring them the rest of the day, which makes me feel really, really badly. So I think that going forward, that I think, like Rabbi Katzman said at the very beginning, what we know about the Omer is this is a period of purification. And there are a lot of very kind of practical daily life things that, to my mind and in my own life, require some serious purification. And I hope that when we come out on the other side, I'm even maybe just a little bit pure, because I entered this state, and now I see in retrospect, pretty impure.
I'll take a stab real quick at I think that my two colleagues answered the first part of the question incredibly astutely. I don't feel like anything that is specific I could possibly add. The second, which is about education for kids, I think that we really need to be thinking about. I will tell you that here's the blessing. For the synagogues across the country that have pivoted their entire business model to going online, have seen incredible advances in numbers. Now, that's for any number of reasons, right? I don't think that can be attributed to just one thing. I think it can be attributed to there being no live sporting events. You can only watch so many reruns. I mean, like, there's 1,000 different reasons for why. But one of them is the convenience, right? Like, there's something to be said for the fact that signing on for Minyan for 15 minutes, it's not like the end of the world. Like, it's actually kind of nice. And I can only speak for Beth El folks, but I would say that the 5 minutes or 10 minutes before services and the 5 or 10 minutes after services is probably more meaningful to watch for me personally, because of the fact that everyone's kibitzing. I mean, we had a Shiva minyan this evening. I mean, you know, we'll have it for the entire week, you know, for a family. And there's no way to see them in person, but people can share stories and they can tell them that they're, you know, how sorry they are and pass on their condolences. And of course, it's not hollow, but it's the best we've got at the moment. But one of the comments that was made by an individual, and my parents have also kind of laughingly said this to me, is that they've never done more Jewish than they have in the past, let's say, month, give or take. And I don't mean that by just like attending Shabbat services. The number of classes they've gone to online. We had a congregant on a Saturday morning who jokingly laughed at me and said, I go shul shopping on Saturday morning. She said, it's amazing. She said, I come to hear you give a sermon, then I tune into my nephew or my cousin in Rochester. Then the next thing you know, I go to Rabbi Cosgrove in New York. Then I tune into David Wolpe in Los Angeles. Like, that's amazing. Like, I want to do that. Like, that sounds absolutely incredible. So again, the technology certainly has certain things, according to Jewish law, that we should think about and have to have deep conversations. And that's not that's not for here. But it is interesting to see as a phenomenon what's going on. So pivoting back to the question on education for the kids, rightfully so. And I really applaud the courage of the organizations of the camps, of at least the sleepaway camps thus far, that have canceled. It is not an easy decision. And kids, you know, going to sleepaway camp is like a rite of passage. Like, if you're a camp person saying, oh, well, you know, you can't go this year, you don't really understand. Like, camp's something special. So I think there's a lot of things to look into. You know, I was joking, you know, with Rabbi Stoller about the idea of, you know, could we have teachers at HUC, you know, at JTS, at YU, I mean, wherever, they could be teaching kids classes they could get college credits for perhaps this summer, right? So it's Jewish content oriented stuff, but yet we're doing that. I can't have them go play kickball, right? We've had kids do birthday parties, just so, I mean, the people on this call may not be in the same framework, right? Maybe for your kids, your grandkids, but have done, you know, birthdays, and they've all driven by the kid's house and been honking the horns and letting balloons go and all kinds of great stuff. It's all been, you know, what have you. And so that's really, really important. The other thing that's going to happen this summer, I can speak for Beth El, is that, you know, we're going to continue to do certain programming for learning. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be some of it won't be necessarily the most fun, but we're going to definitely continue to do learning, because why not? Like, we have the capacity to do it. We have the ability to do it. So why not do it? I can't go anywhere. My classes that I teach, I realize we're gonna stop at the Beit Midrash at Shavuot, but you know, I'm sitting here, right? The reality becomes there's the ability to continue to do more. So I actually think that what's so amazing is that the cream is actually rising to the top. Is that you have the ability right now that if you want Jewish content, if you can't find Jewish content now, you are not looking. Like, you simply are not looking, because there has never been a time in the history of the world where there is as much Jewish content. And I would only add one additional statement, which is it's flattened the Jewish world, right? So when I originally got my first Gemara, and it was bought for me, and it was the Schottenstein, it was the English translation, with the Hebrew and Aramaic. I wanted to grit my teeth on the Hebrew, but somebody made the comment, if you ever want to use this as an academic tech to teach people, you want the English to be there as opposed to gritting your teeth. So, okay, fine. But the fact was there was an English text. Like, you can go anywhere online right now and find a Devar Torah. You can go anywhere online. You can go to Sefaria and find incredible rabbinic texts. You can go to 1,000 different places just by Google, and I guarantee you by tomorrow morning, you could have a full day of learning on Zoom with amazing Jewish educators, none of which, by the way, include any of the folks that are in Omaha, Nebraska, for as great as we may be. And I think that is that is an amazing, amazing thing. Put aside, again, please understand, please put aside Shabbat, festivals, anything like that, just a normal day. So, you know, I mean, I think that's going to be something that's amazing. I hope that our teens, that we're able to connect to them. But listen to what Rabbi Stoller said, they're teenagers. Like when I was a teenager, if you told me, Stephen, you can take an AP class at Hebrew Union College, I would have looked at you and said, you've lost your mind. Like that was not going to possibly happen. But I do believe we have the ability. I believe that our kids are going to be okay through this, even though with camp being canceled and stuff like that. And so we need to take it slow and realize we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But as I like to quote sometimes, Jonathan Sarna, when he wrote American Judaism, and I believe it was in the second volume as well, because he just added to it. But in the first volume of American Judaism, he ended the book by saying that every generation of Jews has looked at the generation after it and said, oh no, we're screwed. This is going to all be over. And sure enough, we haven't let them down yet. So I have a feeling that we're going to come up with new ways of teaching our kids, that this summer, to Rabbi Ari's point, my kids will be with me. You get to have this amazing ability to teach them more about Judaism and to see things and to learn things. I think we're going to be okay. There is no good one answer, but I think it's going to be a holistic approach and we're going to figure it out.
Wonderful. I want to take that, and I feel like that's a great place to end tonight, because we're over our time, and I want to be mindful of the evening. I want to thank everyone for being here. Do you want to give a short snippet of what is entail for? Are you picking up next Wednesday? What's the topic? I believe it's Rabbis Stoller and Abraham. I can read it off the internet, but I thought you might have insight.
Yeah, I don't have the title handy here, but
I can read that for you. Do you want?
Sure.
It's, hello, is anybody out there? God, prayer, and spirituality in the 21st century.
There you go. We came up with some good titles, I think, I have to say. Yeah, we're going to be talking about prayer and spirituality, a 2-week series, which will cap off the Beit Midrash, and then that'll be the next 2 weeks. And then on, it's May 28th is Erev Shavuot, and we have a Tikkun Leil Shavuot in the works for our community, which we'll be collaborating on. And so we invite you to join us for that. Thank you for helping us to make our first year of Beit Midrash a great success. And there'll be more information coming soon about our plans for next year. We're looking at expanding it and making it even more incredible. So we thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe, stay
Thank
healthy.
you. It was a wonderful class.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
Thank you.
Aviva. I see you.
Continue.
Thanks, Jenny.
Guys, it was
Thank you,
very
Jenny.
informative.
Thank you.
Thank you, rabbis. It was
Bye,
very
thank you.
informative.
Mark.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Good to see you guys.
Bye. Hello.
Barbara, okay.
Понимаешь, они встречаются вместе, они ходят. Это
Most people are leaving. Most people are leaving. It's quieted down.
There's something I want to send to Steve. That's right.
I guess that's pretty much it.
Should I ask my questions at a time?
Good to see you all.
Yeah, take care.
Goodbye. We're down to 12.
Hi, how are you? I wanted to, well, this is just great.